Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Feil, and I've got with me today very special guest, Dr. Tracy Winter. Tracy, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your expertise and knowledge on all things neurodiversity. Tell us a little bit about your educational journey and how it's led you to where you are today.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a delight to be here. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of you who are listening for taking the time to do so. Hopefully this will be interesting and helpful to you. My educational journey, I have a very eclectic sort of, my LinkedIn looks like a pinball machine, but the relevant parts for the coaching and for what we're talking about today, I was going to graduate school for organizational development, except it was the same school as human development. And I wrote all of my papers on individuals. And I went, I don't think I'm doing organizational development. I think I'm doing human development. So so in my school had a coaching program. So along the way, I got my coaching credential. This was 15 years ago, maybe. And my PhD is in human development. My area of focus is gifted adults. So I did social emotional development of gifted adults around self-concept. And that was sort of my entree into neurodiversity. Along the way, about halfway through my literature review, when I realized maybe a third of the way, when I realized I was reading all these articles and didn't know what they said. Like, read the same page 5 times, it takes me an hour and I have no idea what's going on. I got diagnosed with ADHD, which was not too surprising. My dad had been diagnosed with it by then. And now other family members have also been. So we travel together. And I was identified as gifted when I was 4. So I'm in the twice exceptional category. We call it gifted and some other stuff. And I've since been not formally diagnosed, but assessed as autistic by some autism-specific therapists I know. Educational journey. The ADHD is strong in me. So there's that. I had my coaching credential, did the PhD, and I came out and tried to make a coaching practice for gifted adults, except gifted adults don't identify as gifted. So when I made it neurodiversity, I got sort of like a much bigger umbrella, and I got like the people I really want to talk to. So it's been very fun.
Yes, so I have a very similar story. I went English major to physical therapist to professor. And so that, for me was definitely not a straight and narrow. But it's also helped, I think. It's crafted who I am, and I don't really look at my recent ADHD diagnosis as a hindrance or a crutch. I had to navigate things a little bit differently, but it's made me who I am, and I think it's helped along the way. So let's start off by just giving everybody a baseline definition of neurodiversity. Let's start there.
So the neurodiversity paradigm is that everyone has a different brain. We actually are all special snowflakes. So sort of like fingerprints, right? No one brain is the same as the other. When we talk about neurodiversity, a lot of the time, though, we're talking about the range of things. So there are some brains that are more like each other than others, that are, sort of what we call neurotypical. I don't love the division of neurotypical and neurodivergence, but there are some brains that are more like each other, closer to each other, right? Who understand each other pretty easily. And then there's some people who have brains that are sort of structured differently and wired differently, significantly differently from that normative, the neuronormative. And that is usually the people who got diagnosed with ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, giftedness. It can also be acquired by neurodivergence, can be acquired by brain injuries or several things. And some people are putting post-traumatic stress in that category as well, because they've seen that it changes the brain structure. So that's neurodiversity, is the idea we've all got these different brains. And the reason that it's a specialization is because there are some brains that are enough different from others that there's a reason to look at things a little bit differently. Yeah.
All right. So selfishly, if we talk about the meat and potatoes of today's episode, I'd like to dive a little bit more into ADHD, right? Especially
Okay.
like later diagnosis ADHD, adult ADHD, whatever you want to call it. Because like I said, I did not really recognize that I had ADHD until about 2 years ago when I was formally diagnosed. And it makes sense in hindsight when I look back at all my struggles and the difficulties I went through in learning. But I was still able to kind of navigate it, right? I was still able to find things and methods that worked for me personally, and allowed me to still have a pretty successful pathway and career. So tell us a little bit about adult ADHD or later diagnosis ADHD or ADHD in general. Like, what are we dealing with there? What does that look like?
Yeah, so ADHD stands for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We also people talk about ADD. Technically, ADD is not a thing since 2013, since the last DSM-5 came out. But it's really a misnomer anyway, because we don't have an attention deficit. It's not that we don't have attention, it's that we have less ability to manage where our attention goes. So most people can put things in a priority list and go, okay, this is the most important thing to do, so I'll do that first, and then they go do the thing. For ADHDers, my attention goes to what is most fun, most novel, shiniest is kind of the way I put it. It's very difficult for me to do the things, even if they are important, that don't have like a payoff or I'm not excited about doing. So I still do them, they still need to be done, but it's a different way of getting there. And so a lot of times, like you were talking about before we started the recording, especially very bright people, twice exceptional folks, they will get to later in life and then there'll be some tipping point. So for me, it was my dissertation, like I was talking about. For another person that I've known for a long time, if you're friends with me, chances are you might be neurodivergent. And she hadn't been diagnosed, but by the time she was married, vice president of a consulting company, just got a promotion with a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And that was sort of her tipping point into, I don't have the coping strategies, but until then, she'd been able to create coping strategies for herself, even though she didn't know that's what's going on. So sometimes there's like that tipping point that happens not until later in life. The other reason it gets diagnosed often that we hear all the time is people bring their kids in for assessment, either the school suggests it or the parents do. And the assessor will ask questions and the adult will be going, isn't that all normal stuff? And they're like, let's have you in for an appointment because ADHD is a very hereditary neurotype. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think fortunately and unfortunately for my kids, they're gonna get it honestly. I can see it already a little bit there. So I get it. It's dad's fault. So again, you mentioned something very important there that I saw in my life, and that was coping strategies and coping mechanisms, right? I had to use time blocking. I had to kind of give myself a little grace. I like, much like you, like the shiny things. I like the creative things. I like, where can my mind go, but still get the things done that it needs to get done. So tell me a little bit about some of those like coping strategies and mechanisms that you see in neurodiverse people.
So it's a range. And as a coach, what I see when my clients come in is that they have tried all of the sort of usual ways that are out there to manage their brain, manage their priority, manage their time, whatever it is. And they haven't worked. I mean, if they'd worked, they wouldn't be talking to me, right? And so what's key about a coping strategy, and I don't really love coping strategy even because it implies like there's something wrong, but it's like, I'm here, I want to get to there with this task done. How do I do that in line with my brain? So I'm not fighting my brain all the way there, because that's what it feels like sometimes. You're trying to like white knuckle it. Okay, I will clean the bathroom. There's nothing fun, novel, or interesting about cleaning the bathroom. And it still needs to get done, right? So how do I jazz that up? Where can I get sort of like a little dopamine boost? Maybe I do something fun ahead of it. Maybe I play some great music. Maybe it's the only time I get to listen to this podcast I love. Those kinds of things. And also rewards. We are not great with intrinsic motivation, which is a bummer, but we can sort of reward ourselves. I got through my dissertation 3 Sour Patch watermelon at a time. And I don't know how I had the willpower to not just like eat the whole bag, because
Right.
sometimes that happens. But I would put 3 of them on my desk in front of me and I would write a page. And when I finished the page, I could have the watermelon and put 3 more there. Like that was just how it worked for that particular thing. The other thing as a coach, what I work with is actually activating that intrinsic motivation. So one of the things I do a lot with my clients is do work around values and really clarify their values, help them understand what they mean to them and all of that. And then we can use those as like, how does this task align with a value? Or how does the task cross a value? And that's why you're having trouble doing it. That can really go, I want to be a person who is, reliable or competent or in integrity or kind, whatever it is. Like, okay, if I were being kind, I would do this thing. So I'm going to go do the thing so I can be the person I want to be. So there's a whole range of things that how people do. And what's really interesting and what I love working about this population is the solutions that we come up with, I don't give them as a coach. I don't give advice. I occasionally will help brainstorm, but they come from my clients. And so they may be unique to that client. It may work for nobody else on the planet, but we figure out what's going to work for that client. What are the strategies? So those are some of the ways that we, sort of, I don't like the word manage, but like get our brains going the way we want them to go.
Yeah. Yeah, like a new standard operating procedure, or I like to call it like an operating system, right? Like reorganizing your operating system so that it works for you. That's how I've kind of looked at it, right? Like, when you get an iPhone or whatever and it updates the operating system, that's kind of what I've had to do over the years to succeed at each level that I've been at, right? And it's been interesting because I didn't really know or even think about having ADHD. It was actually my wife who was like, "Yeah, you might want to get tested. I'm pretty sure you've got it." And I was like, "Really? I don't think so." And she's like, "Oh yeah, you've got it." So it was a blessing, Thankfully, she knew me best and she knew what she could see, and so the prescribing doctor and the diagnosing doctor, who I've known for many many years, said the same thing. He was like, "Oh yeah, I've pretty much known you've had that since college." I'm like, "Well, where were you on that one? Like, where was the heads up? I could have
Right.
gotten ahead of this a long time ago." But what are some of the things that maybe would prompt somebody or make somebody go get tested, or what are things they should look out for to get an idea of whether or not they might have ADHD?
So it's not ridiculous, but some of the social media that's out there is actually very good. And that's one of the reasons that it's pointed to as why adult ADHD has gone up, especially during COVID. I think there were also some tipping points reached during COVID because of the level of stress that we were all under and continue to be under, to be honest. Some of the stuff out there is good. Some of it's totally wacky. It's difficult to discern. Having said that, so some of the things that my clients report and that I align with, I don't recall ever doing a paper before the night before in my entire academic career until I was writing my dissertation. Always. So that sense of urgency is one of the things that can get us going. And oftentimes we can't get going before that. So things like that, like how do you get your time to go? How are you with the things you're not good at? Like the things that aren't fun, how are you getting yourself to do them? There's also some sensory issues that can be part of this in different kinds of neurodivergences. But sensitivity to sound, sensitivity to light, those things can be an indication of neurodivergence in general. Emotional regulation can be a part of ADHD too. That is part of an executive function, and ADHD is an executive function challenge. So having very high highs, very low lows, right? And what that really is because neurodivergent folks have a more sensitive nervous system. It's not just the brain, it's the whole nervous system. And so the level of stimuli at which we get activated is lower than the average bear, or lower than the average bear. So we get stimulated more readily. And that can result in angry outbursts, that kind of stuff. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria, or RSD, is also a thing that's like almost all ADHDers report. And what that is when we get perceived negative feedback, like it hurts. Can be devastating. People report physical pain, like they've seen the pain sensors in the brain light up when this happens for an ADHDer. Like it's big, and it may be like objectively, if that's a thing, out of proportion to what just happened. But for us, it's like the punch to the stomach. And so learning to manage that. So those are some of the things I think of off the top of my head. What do you think of that I haven't?
Well, first off, touching on the feedback one, I could definitely see that over my career as being not an issue, but a thing that I experienced because I just finished reading and giving a little seminar on the book called Thanks for the Feedback. And it's all about receiving feedback. And I recognized that I did not do that very well, not only professionally, but personally as well. And so that book really helped me reframe and reorganize how I accepted feedback and then what to do with it once I got the feedback. And really, it took a huge mindset shift, but I had to start looking at feedback as a blessing. No matter if it was positive, if it was negative, don't live in the high highs or the low lows. Just take it for what it's worth and act on it to get better, right? It's a tool for if we're on a journey toward mastery, it's going to help us get there. Every little bit of feedback is going to help us improve and get better. We have to sift through some of it, based on who's giving it, what the context is. But for the most part, feedback was a tough one to navigate for me.
Yeah, I
Um,
would add that. So you mentioned like don't feel the high highs or the low lows. And for me, my understanding of how this works is I don't have a choice whether I
yeah,
feel the high highs or the low lows. What I have a choice is about the action that I do after that.
yeah,
Right. So it's learning to recognize it and kind of go like, who is this person? Do they mean me to be hurt? The context part that you were just talking
mhm,
about, but like I'm gonna feel it. I don't have control over my nervous system at that level.
yeah,
It's a question of like, okay, now what do I do with this information?
yeah.
And that determines sort of like how we move forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good way of putting it and seeing it. And that's probably what I do with managing the high highs and low lows. I try to temper them and realize don't have that knee-jerk reaction, no matter what it is. If it's really great feedback or if it's negative feedback, take pause, take it in, recognize it for what it is, and then act on it, right? So, like, just what we can do about what we can control and our actions and behaviors moving forward is really what you have to try to take out of that and get from it. So, yeah, I appreciate that. I think the other thing that I kind of recognized, you talked a little bit about like waiting till the last minute to write papers and stuff, and it's like that Parkinson's law, right? Whatever time we give ourselves, we're going to allow to fill it with whatever we need to get it done, right? And so, like, for me, I definitely had that relative last minute type procrastination thing, but once I got into the educational doctorate program and had to start working on a dissertation, I realized that's never going to fly. Like that's just not how this works. So, I can appreciate the Sour Patch watermelon trick. I wish I had thought of that because that is easily my favorite candy. I don't like sweets or treats or desserts. I could live the rest of my life without them. I'm a salty, savory guy. Give me chips, burgers, fries, that kind of thing. But man, those Sour Patch watermelon, that's good motivation right there. So I have to be careful with that one.
My
Um,
other motivation for getting my dissertation done was my chair was retiring.
mm,
And she was like, I'm not staying on, like when I'm done with
yeah,
them.
take it or leave it. I'm
And
here
one of
till I'm
my
here.
committee members had already retired, but he
Oh,
was lucky enough to stay.
yeah.
So like the sense of urgency kicked in. And I wrote it sort of the dissertation version of the night before. I think I wrote it in like I did the research and wrote it in about 4 months.
Wow. Yeah, that was not my journey at all. It
And
because I was
congratulations on that. Well done.
yeah. I was an English major though, so I thought I could just write. It turns out scientific writing is a completely different language and a completely different beast, and that was part of my struggles as well. I had to basically relearn how to write the way that they, science wanted, not the way my flowery English major wanted. So, I think the one other thing too that I noticed is I have to have a little bit of autonomy and give myself the grace to explore some of these creative ideas when they hit. Like it's not always just like I can turn it on and get all these things and create. When it hits, I kind of have to be able to like take a pause and examine it a little and go toward it a little. And feather out what it's going to be and what it could become and what it really is, and then I can come back to the task at hand. But like when quote unquote genius strikes, I've got to let it ride a little bit. I've got to kind of see, because they're like you said, it's not that I can't pay attention or get things done. It's when things happen, I'm trying to reprioritize which one needs to be done immediately and which one can wait, and then which one is going to serve me and get that little dopamine hit and like keep me motivated and give me that autonomy to try to figure things out and try new stuff. So again, it's a little bit of tempering that quote unquote shiny object syndrome, right? And just but also giving myself the grace to know that when motivation hits and I got a hot streak, I got to ride it, And so when I've done my time blocking, I've left 2 hour blocks at the end of the day to kind of catch up on things I missed, or if I, diverted away a little bit and didn't get something done that was blocked off, or a call interrupted that I really had to take, put out some fires. I still have that little cushion at the end of the day to make that stuff up because I just know that's how I am, and that's what's going to happen.
I think some of that is the key for a lot of people is planning for the way my mind works.
Yeah.
So if I have a presentation that I have to create, that's in the evening, I now block the day because I'm pretty sure urgency is going to kick in about 10 a.m. for a 6 p.m. presentation. And I, pull it together and pull it off. Unfortunately, I have not been smacked upside the head about that yet. But if I hadn't cleared the day, I'd be in trouble. So I like that planning for, sort of allowing for the rabbit holes. I think one of the challenges that I see a lot with my clients is coming back from the rabbit hole and the time agnosia around that, right? Like, I'm just going to follow this for like 10 minutes and then it's 2 hours later. And because we don't have an internal sense of time very well, a lot of us, it's like, oh, what just happened? So things like timers and things that disrupt that could be helpful.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Time blocking works for you. I have not found time blocking to work with very many people, including myself.
Yeah,
I blow past what's on there. So that's awesome. You have that as a thing that works for you.
But it's not strict and stringent. It starts out that way, but then I know that I have that fallback at the end of the day. That's the only way it works. I have a loose guideline of what it should be, and then that little bit of cushioning and giving myself grace to like, no, I'm gonna not be able to stick to it 100%, and I'll screw things up and things will get in the way. So again, it's very individual. It's very, and that's something I'd like to talk about too, is, we talked about how different strokes for different folks kind of approach. It's like all these techniques and strategies and, ways to reorder your operating system work independently for each individual person in many different ways. And like I said, overall, I've had a pretty successful career. Like I've got 2 doctoral degrees. I've got my PT license. I run a business. I teach. I do all the things, and I enjoy them, and I love them. But overall, I've had struggles. I've had issues along the way. But if I can do it, anybody can do it. I promise. Like, it's been tough. It's been hard, but it's been worth trying to figure out. What's some advice you would give to people, or like, kind of success stories or motivation, or, for somebody who may be experiencing ADHD?
So it's a very reasonable question. In the autism community, there's a saying, you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. So we generalize about this stuff. Whenever I give a presentation, I say, here's the thing, you can't generalize because this is individually manifesting in different people with different things. And often neurodivergences travel in packs. So like, I got a trio of gifted ADHD, autistic that I know of. That layering makes for something different, plus my experiences in human all things. So like, same thing with ADHD. You've met one person with ADHD, you've met one person with ADHD. So I think generalizing, my clients usually come to me with a lot of shame, with maybe a glimmer of hope, but they may have used up their last little bit of chutzpah, just making the appointment to talk to me. So when they're in that state, telling them, well, I've done it, so you can do it, right? They're like, you don't understand my unique situation. So that actually isn't a piece that I use, even though ditto, right? I have PhD, business. I've done several things with my life. In terms of advice, as a coach, I don't give advice. If I had to give advice, I would say, don't worry about the way everybody else says you need to do it. Like that is actually less likely to work for you, because when they talk about a general population, and we neurodivergent folks are outliers, right? So in a big scale study like that, outliers either get thrown out or rolled into no effect. So I'm always skeptical that even applies to me, honestly, So 21 days to a habit, or you got to do time blocking, or like any of those. I've seen too many of the ones that are like, here's the 10 things to do to be good at your job, and anybody can do these. And it's like half of them are things that are going to be extra challenging for me, right? So like the less you can take that in for yourself, the better, because it's just sort of pushing your square self into a round hole.
Right. So it's knowing yourself, right? Know thyself. That's a big one. And that's always been a big one for me, right? Like I know my limitations. I know when I'm hitting, maximum bandwidth. I know, I love doing 8 things at once and juggling those 8 balls and knowing I can give, my 80% on all 8 of those is better than a lot of people's 100% on one of them. So I'm like, I'm good with this. I know I'm going to fail. I know I'm going to drop some of the balls, but I'll figure it out. But that's not everybody. Like everybody else, has their own ways, but it's knowing yourself, knowing what you can handle and how to excel, what you do best, and what you have to maybe stray away from. So like a SWOT analysis, right? Like a personal SWOT analysis.
One
um
of the things that I do with my clients a lot, around that, like how you get there is the question.
yeah.
So we do know those things, right? So that's what coaches work with, but also like just um, change is really hard. Change of mindset is even harder. For some reason, it feels even harder for an ADHD, but like this is a neurological fact. It takes a lot of glucose to change our neural pathway, right? And our brains really don't want to do it. So when I'm working with my clients to figure out what's going to work for them, we don't say, here's what we're going to do, period. Everything's an experiment. Everything's an experiment, which means you only have to do it until you see me next time. And even then, if you do it once or twice, that's a win, right? So like one of the things that we can get caught up in is sort of the black and white thinking of all or nothing. So we try something and it doesn't work the first time. We're like, forget the whole thing, right? As opposed to like, if you do an experiment, that's one data point. You don't draw conclusions from one data point. Try it some more. And then you say what worked, what didn't, right? Or if you're not doing it all, my clients, come back and say, I didn't do it. Okay, what got in the way? Like that's new data, so you can't fail. So all of that is some of the ways that you can get to what you're talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I love that. um well, Tracy, thank you so much for your time and for coming on here to kind of educate the audience on ADHD and some neurodiversity stuff. But we ask all of our guests this one final question. And that question is, if you could change one aspect of higher education, what aspect would you change and how would you change it?
Ooh, okay, wait a sec. I was not prepared. Ah,
And we like it that way.
sneaky. Give me 1 second to collect.
Yeah, yeah, no worries. Take your time. This is a big thinker, 30,000 foot view, heavy hitter type question. So uh, there's a lot that can be changed right now. We're in a world of hurt in higher education. So a lot of issues out there.
So with my lens, I would love it if professors, teachers, admin, everybody started out with just more awareness of this stuff, not as a deficit, right? Neurodiversity, specifically, we don't look at brains as having deficit. They're just different, right? They're not broken, they're different. We could see that. You could see that the kid who is underperforming, but like can't figure out why. Like, okay, so get curious about that, right? And I think that's the key to so much. And it's when I do leadership development, when I do coaching, the key is to be curious. And so I think I was going to say more neurodiversity awareness, but really what I want is more curiosity about the individuals. Like what's going on for you that's true, and how can we help you do your best, right? And you don't have to know that the person's neurodivergent for that. That's what everybody should have, right? It's the ways to do their best. And it's true in the workplace, it's true in higher education. So like, what supports are available that we can help to get you doing your best, whether you are diagnosed with 3 different, neurotypes or not. Or, like everybody needs something to do their best, right? So more curiosity and less immediate judgment.
I love that. I love that. That's a very universal design inclusivity approach to education in general, and just I love that curiosity because again, that's probably, truth be told, how I succeeded most of my life. Going back to that childlike wonderment where we really were curious about things and constantly questioning, and I am bad about my kids when that why, I don't know, I don't know all the things. But luckily
But how could you
nowadays,
find out, right? Like,
right,
the
right,
question
exactly. I
becomes,
was
how
just
could
gonna
you
say,
find out?
nowadays we have Google and we have AI and we have all the things. We have all the information at our fingertips. But being curious and really getting to the root of it for people and individuals more than anything is a great approach. So thank you so much for everything, for sharing your insight. Where can people find more about you if they want to know about the coaching aspect and all that you do to help people with neurodivergence?
Yeah, thank you for asking. So my practice is called Nerd Coach. Website is www.nerdcoa.ch. And I am Tracy at Nerd Coach, a.ch. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there. I'm the one in Austin. I also, if there are any coaches listening, I'm the co-founder of the Neurodiversity Coaching Academy, where we are helping coaches become more neurodiversity inclusive in their practice. So those are the two main spots to find me.
Awesome. We'll put those links in the show notes so it's
Thank
easy
you.
for everybody to find. Tracy, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
I appreciate you having me and having this discussion and wanting this information out there. So it's been lovely, Scott.